This video involves the Station Manager. So from the menu bar we select Maintenance. Then we select Station Manager. Now you can have as many stations, up to 99 stations, even though you may only have a 5 or 10 user license. It's just that you can't run more than 10 stations simultaneously if you have a 10 user license. So let's edit the very first station, Dan. Now this first one here says this is going to be my default. So when I log in, I will be on station 1. So here's my station number and station name. You can put whatever you want. And I'm going to collect the money from people at the counter, and I'm going to put it in my cash drawer at station 1. Other people can put their money into my cash drawer if you're sharing a cash drawer between two actual stations. Here's where I have my wallpaper for my station. And here's where I say prompt to log out securely or be able to switch users. So when I do log out, I want to do it securely. I don't maximize my screens because they may take up too much space and I can't see the other screens that I've minimized. Right here is where this station typically is a counter, so it's doing retail. It can be also involved with wholesale or projects. So everybody's station is you defaulted to whatever that person normally does. Maybe the accounting people will have administratives because that will charge the administrative GL accounts. So that's what this is for, so it knows what GL accounts to charge. Under transactions, we always want to use invoice style. Down below here, we can say show customer sales, show quick sale. If you leave them blank, then they'll all be available. If someone does a return, what should we do? When a return is put on an account, we should ask what to do. We should apply credit immediately or apply credit later. When you're creating a new transaction, you can have this station prompt for a user ID. This is if you have multiple people working at the same station and you want to keep track of who did the sale. Here's where we say prompt for the salesperson. So even though I'm ringing up the sale, perhaps Devin is the one that actually gets the commission because he's the one that helped the customer. And then you can say stay on invoice. After you complete the sale, stay on the invoice screen for the next customer that walks up. Ask to print before finalizing invoices and layaways. This will give you a chance to print it and look at it before you actually say, okay, I'm going to tender it now. We do want to combine same SKU items on the transaction because if we have quantity discounts, we want to be able to have it on one line that we are selling 3 of these items, not 3 separate line items. If we can't find the item, we could prompt to have a lookup list. We can use fast add, which is something that we may not have in an inventory, but the customer is holding in his hand, and the people in the back office didn't get it into our inventory. We can create it on the fly with just a couple of pieces of information like a SKU and a name, and then later on go back and correct that item. And we want to use the full calendar scheduler. So when we're setting dates that the product needs to be shipped out or appointments need to be made. Here's some overrides from our system setup. If it says prompt for email, but maybe this station on the counter says don't prompt for email when we're working at this station. Same thing with zip code. Don't ask for the zip code even though everybody else's gets prompt for a zip code. Or do not ask for a phone number. Age verification is typically when you're selling liquor or things like that need an age verification. Most of the restaurants, equipment dealers, have no age restriction on being able to buy things. Touchscreen is a graphical touchscreen that can be set up at the counter to use your finger on a touchscreen instead of using the normal invoice type. Miscellaneous is, do we want to show the cost when entering the invoice? Typically people don't select that because they don't want the customer leaning over and seeing what your cost is. But we do want to show the cost when we're doing job cost or sales orders or service orders or quotes, because that's important for us to know what our profit margins are and make sure we're selling it at the right cost. Hiding the customer info box on the scheduling calendar, that keeps the addresses and stuff, and it just has the customer name and not the full address. And skip prompt for password when taking of payments. I usually leave that off and just say, go ahead and take the people's money. We don't need a password. Or use Fast AR Pay, which will allow us to just put for a customer and then put the dollar amount. And then retrieving suspended transactions, we set this for all stations or just the station we're currently on, are all in this particular division, like the retail division. I just set it for all stations. It makes it easier when I want to suspend a sale and then recall it again. And when I do that, if I suspend a sale on station 1, I can recall it on station 2. If station 1 is busy with customers, station 2 can take that customer and bring up its suspended sale. Security is set up when you have your cameras, and what this will do is the cameras and the invoices that you're creating are syncing. So if you want to see a video on a specific invoice, you'll go to that invoice in the software and it will then show you the video of that customer checking out. Register balance gives you the ability to have printed documentation when you close out your register at the end of the day. And then you can tell it what printer you want to go to. Credit cards. If you're going to use credit cards, you'll click the Use Electronic Credit Card Capture, and then you'll put all your credit card information and your setup for your merchants and merchants' IDs. Devices. When you set your cash drawer up and you're using a cash drawer at this particular station, you have cash drawer settings. You have to put in codes that will kick the electronic cash drawer open if that particular sale needs to open the cash drawer. And then you put what port it's on, and then you put in what printer, like a thermal printer, is typically where the cash drawer gets connected. Poll display, if you're using poll displays, you would put in whatever the codes are for that. Portable scanners. These are much like the data collectors. They're not the same thing as a barcode scanner. This is more of a scanner that you're going to scan a bunch of items and then say send it to my invoice screen. Multi-monitor, if you have a primary monitor that you're working on, but you want a customer display right behind yours, you can activate this multi-monitor and have various things print on there, such as pictures of the items you're ringing up or any kind of special notes, so the customer can see that without looking at your monitor. And these can be set up during the training sessions. COM ports, if you have different COM ports off the back, pretty much everybody's using USBs now, so this is pretty much legacy type stuff because serial ports aren't typically on machines anymore. Signature capture, these work really wonderful when you're at the counter. You can have the customer sign for sales orders, invoices, whatever you want them to sign on, and this way it'll be electronically stored on that document. As you can see, transactions on account, creating new layaways, creating new orders, creating a new service order. It will prompt and they will sign it and it'll show up on your screen and then it shows up on the document. The Verifone, this was a unit that also is now legacy. They don't use these anymore. They now have different credit card terminals that are used. So this is just left over from when these things were in use. Printers and emails. Printing options. Most important, delay printing until transaction is saved. We do this because we're using Report Writer for all the forms, and the Report Writer needs to get its information from the hard drive, not from the memory that is currently ringing up the order. So this delays it a second, enough time for it to write to the drive, and then we pull it back off the drive and print our document. You can skip the printing of the invoice and receipt, but then you can print it right from the change due screen. Always prompt choose printer when invoicing. Once you set your default printers up, you don't want to have to stop and constantly keep picking a new printer or the same printer. Always prompt to preview when invoicing. I have this checked because I use this software to do demos and the customers can't see my documents. So by prompting to preview, it will come up with a screen and give me the ability to continue showing what's on the screen and making sure it's right before I actually print a hard copy. Use alternate invoice printer when invoice is on account. In many cases, when we print at the counter, we're just printing a 40 column wide thermal printer receipt. But if it's going to be on account, then it'll print an 8.5 by 11 to give to the customer also, to take back with him. Are we going to do pick lists? So on a pick list, when it says, all right, when we complete an order, it'll print on the pick list the stock location in the warehouse, and it'll also print how much the system thinks is in the warehouse. Electronic journal is hardly ever used. It's all legacy. But if you want to keep track of a text file showing the sale that was rung up and the receipts that were given, you can store this file in this journal path. Grouping. When you do an invoice, do you want to group your invoice, or you want to just say no grouping, invoice displays as entered? Or you can group it by category. So if you have your items set up in different categories, like small wares, electrical, tables, whatever, you can group those on the invoice and then subtotals. Show category subtotal summary at the end of the transaction. Once again, it's just a recap at the bottom of how many forks, knives, spoons, and stuff that we put on this particular invoice. When printing your transaction, print as displayed, sort it by the SKU, or sort it by description, your choices. And then here is where you can have your group categories that we talked about. Packing slips. Packing slips, when you print the invoice, you'll get a packing slip with no dollars on it, but you usually put that in the box when you ship it. So when they open up the box, the warehouse guys don't know what things cost, but they do get a chance to verify what's on the slip is in the box. So it's up to you whether or not you want to do packing slips. You can say ask, and it will then prompt you, do you want a packing slip, yes or no? Customer labels, these are things that will print on the boxes and will have the address and contact name, etc. On purchase orders, when we do a PO, what should we do? Should we automatically print the PO, automatically email the PO, ask to either print or email, or do nothing? So now comes the actual forms. These invoice forms, we use Report Writer to create customized forms that'll use TrueType fonts. So this one here on the invoice, we're telling it to go to this printer that this workstation has access to. And the reporter type, we say we want to use an invoice form. There's a list of all different types of forms that we create for the customer that fits exactly how they want to print those documents, whether it's on a pre-printed form or whether it's just on an 8.5 by 11. We will then print all the boilerplate, the logos, the whole bit. So in this case, we're using an invoice form. And if we email a form, is that email form going to look different than our other invoice? So you can create your own HTML emailed invoice. Each of these items are basically the same thing. You just tell it the type of document you want to print. And again, these are unique for this workstation only. Another workstation could have different documents for sales orders. It all depends on the different departments you're using and how you want your documents to show. So that's the same for all these different types of documents. Fulfillment is where you're sending a document to the dock, and the guys in the warehouse then will fulfill the items that are on the fulfillment and help the guy get it into his truck. So that is the Station Manager and all its features.